had UAE investment, and the Emiratis pulled out because the UN group of experts found that there were lots of conflict minerals in this gold buying program. It wasn't the central bank, but it was a similar setup. And so for high risk, there's central bank buying and then there's central bank buying. So for high risk areas like the DRC, really needs to have proper certification on the ground. The governments of the region have agreed on a certification process. I was actually involved in Bujumbura when they wrote this thing, and we and some other NGOs advised on it. It's very good on paper. It has all these checks and balances, et cetera, but it's not being implemented well. And so that's where the Public-Private Alliance on Responsible Minerals Trade, there needs to be more support to that. And those are the kinds of things that can counter illicit activity by China and others.
So then what about, and my last question, Mr. Chair, what about also brokering a sustainable ceasefire to the destabilizing fighting led by the Rwandan-backed M23? I mean, can you speak about that? And I think that we have been missing in action, leading Qatar to convene peace talks between Congo and Rwanda. So does that play a role? I think stabilization in the region is incredibly important. And are you maybe aware of any U.S. role in trying to preserve the fragile ceasefire, I guess, that was reached last week? Maybe on Signal. Did you get anything on Signal?
I think that the ceasefire was a nice piece of paper that was quickly followed by a Rwandan military advance to Kisangani, or towards Kisangani. And the reality is, unless Rwanda and the DRC actors who are aiding and abetting other armed groups like the FDLR, unless they're held accountable, then these pieces of paper will be completely meaningless. I think that the initial step of sanctioning a senior Rwandan government minister and some M23 officials and companies was helpful. The European Union followed by much stronger sanctions. These one-off initiatives are good, but they're not going to mean anything unless there's actually a sustained program to pay attention to that. And then once there's a level of seriousness to it, I mean, as somebody highlighted earlier, the DRC army is running away at present, then you can see some progress. 10 years ago, there was progress, and the blueprint is there in front of us. There was an M23 conflict, and Rwanda withdrew once there was serious consequences. In particular, World Bank money was pulled out, and that had a major impact because that's direct budget support.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Thank you for your interest, your dedication, and your sincerity in trying to find reconciliation and peace and prosperity to this region. To my esteemed colleague, Congresswoman Kamlager-Dove, thank you for your insight. The Trump administration has embarked on a campaign against USAID over the last 2 months, shuttering thousands of U.S.-funded assistance programs across the globe. At least one of those programs aimed at improving accountability in the DRC's mining sector. The project in partnership with Enterprise EGC and Responsible Mineral Initiatives, RMI, aimed to ensure that the production and export of cobalt and other strategic minerals in the DRC met standards of social and environmental responsibility and traceability, and to address some of the complex governance issues that contribute to the perception of DRC as a high-risk investment destination. This program has since been terminated. I'd like to first start off with Sasha, if you don't mind, and I thank each of you for your time and talent that have come before us today. Can you please explain how the extraction of critical minerals in the DRC fuels conflict?
Sure. Thank you for highlighting these important issues, Congressman Jackson. Yeah, I mean, it's very unfortunate that there are critical minerals in Eastern Congo. Tin, tantalum, and tungsten are the three that are, unfortunately continue to fuel some of the conflict. I will say, I've been working on the DRC for about 17 years now. And the situation for those particular minerals was much worse before. And you had basically a free-for-all at mines, and companies had no idea where they got their minerals. Now you have a auditing system that industry set up, thanks to Congress, to trace and audit these minerals, and almost 2/3 of them, 66% of the smelters, which are the key choke points in these supply chains, have now actually passed these independent audits. The issue is that there's some smugglers on the ground who have taken advantage of some of these loopholes and this traceability mechanism, which we talked about earlier, the ITSC, which is pretty opaque, and why the electronics industry suspended them, have gotten around some of those systems. So there needs to be better enforcement of the certification mechanism and some of these transparency standards, so that there can be a much better symbiotic relationship between the DRC, the DRC, Rwanda, Uganda, etc., whereby there can be a peaceful trade. And there has been a peaceful trade for some time, but, unfortunately, Rwanda and others, have stepped in to take advantage of some of that. But I do believe that can be restored, as long as there's real consequences for the illicit actors.
Thank you. As well, Mr. Thierry, as well, do you believe that the gutting of U.S. foreign assistance in the DRC creates a void for China to fill as it further pursues control of critical minerals?
I would say, based on my statement, I think the void is created by our absence. The sanctions system, I said, is pretty much all stick and no carrot. So I recommended that we have carrot sort of involvement with OFAC, the Treasury, OFAC licensing. But then what's happening right now with the assistance program, I would almost defer to Congress, because the spending authority is yours. Under law, there is a presence, but it's just that right now we're going through a situation where the U.S. government is deciding to review all of these spending decisions. So I think it's calling for the leadership of this committee on these decisions to guide the administration on how to make these most effective. So I think the leadership of Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Jacobs is probably warranted the most right now, to make sure that there isn't an absence or a void in the midst of these decisions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Thierry. Well, again, I thank each of you, and I would probably add to that, for the record, there's been a gutting of this department when the employees have been removed. Life will go on. There will be a continuous void. And to rebuild what they've taken out in the last 2 months could take us 5 or 10 years from trying to capture that intellectual talent and restaff these agencies. But then again, I'm honored to be here with my esteemed chairman, Mr. Smith. And again, thank you each for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Anything you'd like to add before we close? Because your testimony has been outstanding, incisive, and give us a blueprint for action. Thank you. Mr. Bore? Thank you. Thank you, and the hearing is adjourned.
You